In this lesson, we'll learn how to use the Content-Aware Move tool to move and extend certain elements of a photo. So you might run into the situation where you've taken a photo and you have a certain element in there that really isn't benefiting the composition, and perhaps you want to move it to a different location. Well, this is where you can use the Content-Aware Move tool to achieve that. Or you may want to take some information and cover up something else, basically by extending it. Again, this tool proves to be very useful in that regard. So we're going to demonstrate first with this little mushroom right here, maybe relocating it to another area. So what you want to do is come over here to where you have whatever healing tool currently active. Just click and hold down and choose the Content-Aware Move tool right there. So with this tool, you can simply draw a selection around the element that you're wanting to move. Okay. Now look up here in our options panel. See where it says sample all layers? Okay, we want to make sure that we do have that check mark, but notice right now it's grayed out, and that's because we actually need to go ahead and add another layer. So just clicking on that new sheet button right there. So now it is available to us, and again, you just want to make sure that you check mark that. Now we also have a couple of options over here next to where it says mode. We have move and extend, and so we're going to demonstrate both of these. So with our selection made, I'm going to take our Content-Aware Move tool, and let's go ahead and move this mushroom over here. Now notice the edge of this selection that we're moving here. It seems very harsh. You can tell that we're covering up some of those leaves right there. I can see just at the top of the selection how we're overlapping some leaves. But what happens when we release? So it does a little bit of thinking, and you can see how it's weaved it in there. And at first glance, that actually looks pretty good. But if you start to really look in there, you can see we kind of have a hard to find edge. So we'll talk about how to maybe remedy that. But really quickly, I'm going to turn off the visibility of the background. You can see what's happening behind the scenes here. So we moved that element, and then in place of where it was, it fills that in with new information. It's basically kind of covering its tracks where it was previously located. So you can basically see what's happened here. Okay, and that's using the mode of move up here in our options panel. Now I'm going to go ahead and take a couple of steps back here. So we still have our selection, and if we come up here to where it says adaptation, click on that little gear. And if you watched the previous lesson where we work with the patch tool, then you'll have kind of an idea as to how structure and color work. So structure basically allows us to dictate how strictly the source structure is being preserved. Okay, so you can enter in a value between 1 and 5. Okay, so if it's set to 5, it's going to be very strict as it adheres to the patterns that you have in the image. Okay, now if we set this, say, to 1, it's going to be very loose, and so we might get a different result as to how it blends into its surrounding. So we're going to go ahead and again take this and move this over here. Again, notice kind of that upper edge where we have that leaf right there. Photoshop starts to do its thing, and I kind of feel like that wove it in just a little bit better as far as kind of placing that into this very kind of organic setting where we have all these little leaves and such. Okay, so it really kind of depends kind of on the setting that you kind of have there as to kind of how that's going to weave in. Now let's talk about extend. Okay, we've already kind of showed you kind of what's happening behind the scenes here when you choose the mode of move. But let's say we want to cover up this big mushroom here with just some of this foliage. I'm going to go ahead and actually create a new layer just so we can kind of demonstrate this on separate layers. So with extend, I'll go ahead and make a selection here, a relatively large selection. And with that selection made, I'm going to go ahead and pull that up over that big mushroom. We'll go ahead and let go and let Photoshop kind of do its thing there and weave it in. And that actually looks pretty nice. Again, with a shot like this where you have a lot of kind of organic elements kind of scattered around, it'd be very hard to easily detect that that mushroom was there previously. But to kind of look behind the scenes here, you can see in this case, what we've done is we just took that selection, we extended it up to a new location. So it's different from what we did with move, where we moved that element and then it's also filling in information where it was previously located. So that's basically the difference there between move and extend. Let's go ahead and switch over to project file 06.1 begin and put this to more practical use. So what I'd like to do is maybe move this elephant over just a little bit further. He's kind of right there in the center of this image. So again, I'm going to make a new layer so that I can, again, make sure that I have sample all layers check marked right there. And we're going to use move this time instead of extend. And I'm going to draw my selection not only around the elephant, but also around his reflection. When you do stuff like this, you want to put into account how other elements are going to look if you move something that relates to it. And so in this case, we want his reflection to follow along. So I'm going to go ahead now and take him, and I'm going to move him down and try to kind of line up the shoreline as best as I can there. So right about there, I think would be okay. So Photoshop will do a little bit of thinking here, and then we'll see how that turns out. And it actually looks pretty good, though we do have a little bit of wonkiness right here and even in the water. And we'll go ahead and see how we can use the extend option to kind of rectify that. So what I generally like to do is go ahead and do that on another layer. But if you have a look here, you can kind of see what's happened. It's moved it over, but it's also filled in where it previously was. So I'm going to make a new layer here. We're going to switch to extend. And what we can do here is a number of things. We could try and maybe make a little selection right here. And we can kind of extend that up if we wanted to try that and kind of see kind of how that looks, you know. We want to kind of keep kind of a nice organic feel to that grass edge. You can kind of see what it looked like before. It's not perfectly, absolutely straight. And then same thing down here. We have some irregularities with the water, so I might want to kind of extend some of that information over from the side. And now one thing that I'm starting to notice here is the color differentiation, okay? If we hide our selection, you can kind of see what I'm talking about right there. So this is where we want to come up here and talk about color. So right now, if it's set to 0, that option is disabled. But you can set it between a value of 1 and 10. 10 will give you a much stronger color blending than, say, something like 1, okay? So the color adaptation can really be dictated by the value you enter in here. So we could try something like 5 or 6, I think would be fine. I'm going to make a selection here. And let's go ahead and extend that over and kind of see how that weaves in. Photoshop does a little bit of thinking, and that feels just a little bit more consistent. So you can kind of start to play around with that, see how that starts to weave in. I want to do the same thing up here. I'd like to get rid of this little bit of information. Looks like kind of a post and part of a tree. So same thing right here. This is where you might want to adjust the value for the color adaptation. Photoshop will start to weave it in there, and that actually looks pretty nice. It might not look that clean if you'd use something like a value of, say, 1. Now, I also want to get rid of this unsightly elephant dung down there, so we'll kind of do the same thing there with the extend mode, and that looks pretty nice, right? And, you know, you can really kind of continue on over here. If there are any areas that feel like they're kind of repetitive, you can kind of see a few little spots here just on this rocky area. So you may want to kind of play around with kind of weaving in some additional information just to kind of mix it up so that it doesn't look perfectly repeated. You don't want to have some noticeable pattern throughout. So just kind of playing around with that there, just to kind of mix it up. So you could really spend a lot of time getting a lot more granular with that, really making that look a lot more natural. But overall, just looking at this, I would never know that this elephant or any of those other elements were in this image. So you can see kind of the difference as to where we started at and where we are ending. So using that move option there, you can see how we moved the elephant over and how it was kind of filling in the information where it used to be. And then the extend option, how we're basically extending information to new locations, okay? Bringing all that together, we have an entirely new image. So that's how you can use the content-aware move tool to not only move different elements of an image, but also extend certain elements of an image to other locations.